Fungi. Nature's most interesting decomposers. From past life comes new, and fungi's always there to break it down for you. Finding a mushroom in the forest is a lot like discovering the barrier between nature and make-believe. Like, do you really mean to tell me that a magical toad isn't playing a little banjo in there?
Today we're on a journey to see what we can find. We're looking for mushrooms, but not that kind. For every episode we've done so far, we've featured a special guest expert to help us learn. And in just a few minutes, we'll be speaking with Forager chef Stéphane Levac. But your first special guest is me. I'm the guest expert. The expert is me. I'm Luba, and I am not a scientist. But I have been spending the past few years learning about mycology, and I can confidently tell you at least the basics on how to identify a mushroom. There are 3 important things that you need to know when identifying a mushroom. There's the caps, the gills, and the stem. The cap is what most people look at when they see a mushroom. They come in a bunch of different colors and shapes, but they are far from the only thing that you need to know. The second most important thing is the gills. Much like looking under the hood of a car, the gills are going to tell you exactly what you need to know. Some will run down the stem, a lot of gills attached to the stem, some aren't attached to the stem at all, and some don't even have gills. Lastly, the stem. They come in a whole bunch of different colors and shapes, and some mushrooms also don't have stems. But putting these 3 pieces of the mushroom puzzle together should help you identify your mushroom. In fact, looking at this mushroom, we can tell by the cap, the gills, and the stem that we're looking at
A chanterelle. Chanterelles are a delicious edible mushroom with an orange cap and wavy forked false gills. The inside should peel kind of like string cheese. The inside is also white and not hollow. They grow on the ground and not directly on wood, which is a good way to separate it from toxic lookalikes.
Sometimes, even with these 3 things together, if you're still really trying to identify what that mushroom is, what you can do is a spore print. What you do there is you take the cap of the mushroom, put it on a piece of paper, cover it with a bowl or a cup, and after a few hours, you'll see what color the spores are, and that should really help you narrow it down. But to be honest, this is really only the tip of the iceberg. There's also coral fungi, jelly fungi, there's plants that rely on fungi to live, there's lichens, which are a fungi and an algae, and they rely on the air and are really good indications of pollution. But that's a lot to learn, and I'm hungry. So, to teach us more, let's speak to chef and forager, Stéphane Levac. Hey, Steph.
Hi, Luba.
Thanks so much for meeting up to forage today.
My pleasure.
What exactly are we looking for in the woods?
We're going to be looking for chanterelle mushrooms.
Ooh, that's exciting.
I know, right?
Well, I'm hungry, so no time to waste.
Let's go.
All right, let's go. So, Steph, what inspired you to bring foraged food into your cooking?
I think it's my indigenous roots, to tell you the truth. But also, early on when we first moved to Nova Scotia, we had a catering business. And I didn't really have a space to cater out of. And I met Dave Smart, who owned Front and Central at the time. But just spending some time with him, he had all kinds of ingredients that I wasn't familiar with in his walk-in. He would tell me about them. And, I thought it was kind of neat. So I started gathering and trying to figure out how can I incorporate some of these foraged ingredients into my own dishes.
You're like a foraged food magician.
Well, I try. I think it's super interesting and I love it.
How about sustainable practices in terms of when you see a patch, are mushrooms good if you pick a lot or should you just pick a couple?
You would just take a certain percentage if you're to find a big patch and leave some for the next.
When we're looking for beginner mushrooms, we'll say, what exactly are we looking for?
I think chanterelle is a great beginner mushroom.
Oh, they're right there.
They're pretty easy to spot. I get a lot of questions, how can you tell chanterelle to a false chanterelle? And really it's looking under the cap. A true chanterelle will have folds, whereas a false chanterelle has true gills.
Right.
When people ask me how do you know about mushrooms? And it's just I tend to go by that. Anything with gills, I will not touch. I just go with what I know.
Yeah.
Just to be safe.
Better safe than sorry, for sure.
For sure.
All right, how do we go about harvesting?
Well, I brought a couple knives.
Oh.
For myself and one for you.
Oh, great. I trust myself with a knife, no problem.
Yeah, I also brought some bags.
Okay.
A little wooden bowl for us to carry around. So,
Oh, cute.
I think we're good to look around a little bit more.
Yeah, where there's some, there's probably more. How do we know if they're good or not?
When they start to rot or like they've been attacked by a slug already.
Okay.
But there's a couple of beautiful ones here for sure.
Would you say that foraging has helped you connect to nature in a certain way?
Absolutely. I mentioned going back to my indigenous roots. I was adopted at an early age. And since moving to Nova Scotia, I'm really finding myself not only as a chef, as a indigenous person, but also as a father. It's really become like a spiritual thing for me, I feel like I'm at home out in nature for sure. It just takes a load off my shoulders, being super busy at the restaurant. I'm around people all day long, and at the end of the day, that's the last thing I want to do. So I get away from that, we might come in the forest and see what I can find, but at best, if it's more about my mental health, that's what I'm also looking for.
Right. So you're not just foraging your food, it's like soul food.
Absolutely,
almost.
Yeah, for sure.
That's beautiful. This is an amazing harvest. Steph, what are we gonna make with this?
I think we're gonna make some tacos.
Tacos? I think that's a good idea.
Yeah, have a little snack.
Yeah, let's go make
Awesome.
tacos. So this is your restaurant, hey?
It is.
Wow.
The beautiful Bay of Fungi. We got Cape Door in the backdrop. Cape Split is that way. And we're at Chipman Brook right now.
And this is exactly where we want to be.
Yes, for sure.
So how do we make these tacos? How do we do it?
Well, we're gonna make our own torts using massive flour and some water. Never done this out in the wild, so hopefully it works.
And did you come up with this recipe?
I'm winging it. You tell me if it tastes good or not.
All right, what's next?
We're gonna press them together and then we're gonna put them in the pan. So then we're gonna work on the chanterelles. We're gonna saute them in a little pheasant fat.
Whoa.
I mean, that's probably good for 2 tacos, right?
Yeah.
I made my own salt, which we're gonna use as seasoning. And the salt is actually infused with spruce tips, as well as sea truffle from here in the Bay of Fungi.
Okay.
All right, let's do this. So we'll say this is done. All right, we're gonna work on the sauce. I took some pine cones. I've experimented with it so much at this point.
So we got pine cones, brown sugar, and water. Nice.
And then we're gonna infuse it with ramp vinegar. Then I have some pickled ramps. We have some wood sorrel for a little garnish. We have garlic scape pesto, pheasant fat powder. It's just gonna be a good time, I think.
All right, Steph, this looks incredible.
Thank you.
The tide's catching up to us, I think.
I know, right?
We should probably eat this in the skadoodle.
How local is this?
This is incredible.
Right? Cheers.
This is the best thing I've ever eaten in my whole entire life.
Stop it.
No, I'm not lying.
As we eat our meal, I can't help but reflect on how we got here. Be they fungi, trees, berries, weeds, spring bulbs, or wildflowers, all parts of nature work together for a greater good. They share information. They provide. They create. They heal. Sounds a lot like our guests, to be honest. The more I learn, the more I want to learn more. Because at the end of the day, nature is important. Nature is fascinating. And most of all,
Nature's cool.
I took a big bite.
Did you?
I did.
Oh my God. I've never eaten anything like this. Steph, thank you so much for sharing this with us.
Thanks for having me.
Sorry, I'm eating with my mouth full. How rude. I can't stop.
You're rocks.
They're holding it down. They're holding down the fort.